Hello and welcome to the Tom's Hardware Show. I'm Jared Walton, and I'm here this week with Paul. Paul,
Hello.
as always. This has been an exciting week for AMD news, right, Paul? What you got
Big week
for
for
us?
AMD news. Big week for AMD news. This week, we'll just jump right in. This week, AMD announced Ryzen 7000. We've been waiting a long time to learn the details about Ryzen 7000. We had some basic ideas. As usual, a lot of the information that we've heard is wrong. But a whole lot of it was right. There's just a lot of things that they went over. The core counts don't change from the previous generation. AMD on September 27th will launch 4 new processors. You have the 7950X with 16 cores, 32 threads, 7900X with 12 cores, 7700X with 8 cores, and the 7600X with 6. So these are the same core counts as these chips had with the prior generation. So AMD is staying at the same place. They're static with their core counts. What has changed is they are a lot faster. Number one, you have the Zen 4 micro.
Wait, do I need to add our slides here?
Sure. Yes.
We'll walk through some of these. There you go.
Yes. This slide isn't going to show you, but just from a high level, the architecture has changed. So you get up to 13% improvement in IPC. And then the clock speeds are extremely high. They're the highest that AMD has had of the Ryzen generation, peaking at 5.7 gigahertz. So there you go. That's the slide. So these two combined, your performance is basically IPC of the architecture. The frequency combined, they say you get 29% gain in single-threaded performance. Now, there's some caveats with that, as there is, to everything that vendors announce, no matter what company they come from. But this is impressive. It's better than a lot of people had expected. So
5.7 gigahertz, like that will easily be the highest clocked CPU, like officially released CPU we've ever seen. Maybe Raptor Lake beats that when it comes out, but I mean, that's a huge jump for AMD. Their previous gen was 4.8.
Yeah, and Raptor Lake does beat it with 5.8 gigahertz. Intel hasn't officially announced it, but I can assure you that the specs that we have in our coverage are correct for the Raptor Lake, at least as it stands right now for the Raptor Lake family. It'd probably be pretty hard for them to really change course much at this point. So 5.8 is on one processor in the Raptor Lake stack. And so they have the frequency win, but that's about it. Now, Intel's also adding a lot of cores, but we can get to that in a minute. Before we talk about Raptor Lake, let's talk about pricing. The 7950X is $699. That's $100 less than its equivalent processor at launch. So that's good, especially considering inflation and all of that. Now, Intel has said it's going to raise prices. So here on this top end SKU, AMD has actually lowered prices. Then when we look at 7900X, 549 is the same. The problem comes in when we look at the 7700X. That chip has went up quite a bit over the previous gen model. Probably it's kind of hard to justify jumping that $100 until we see the pricing, but yeah, it went up $100. And then you also have the 7600X at $299, which is the same as the prior generation model that was the same. But AMD took a lot of flack for the high level of entry-level pricing for Zen 4 with the last generation. So they're sticking with it. They're staying with it. It's $299 to get in the door. Now, considering you can get some, Ryzen 5000 is not going anywhere, and you can get some really cheap motherboards for it, I think that they're going to kind of leverage that as their whole value tier. You could pick up a 5900X for stupid cheap right now. So probably for about what that 7600X would cost you.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. Like, how does the 5900X compare to the 7600X in, real world performance? I suspect it won't be better in gaming, but in certain workloads, like double the thread count, it's going to be faster.
Yes, there's going to be some real, interesting situations that arise with this pricing. And when it comes to pricing, one thing that is going to be a challenge for AMD is DDR5. All of these chips you can only use DDR5. And as we know, DDR5 memory right now is still expensive. You can basically think of it as twice the price of DDR4, especially if you're buying a good quality kit with XMP, which AMD is not using. But well, they support it, but they have their own version now called Expo. But one of these kits with a decent memory profile that will run faster is going to cost you significantly more money and than standard memory. Now, AMD expects those prices to go down throughout the remainder of the year. They're even talking about price crossover into next year, which means that the two will become similarly priced and one will become lower, which would be DDR5, but we'll see about that. So that is where they stand on pricing. They're going to have a hard, it's going to be a hard challenge for them with Intel being so aggressive with their Alder Lake pricing. And then when Raptor Lake comes, we expect that Intel will continue to be aggressive. They say they're going to raise prices, but I don't think they're going to raise them too much. We'll see.
Yeah, so let's see. We've got pictures that AMD provided of the CPUs. Nothing really to see there that we haven't seen already. Although, I mean, like, do you want to say anything about this heat spreader? It's kind of it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I held a heat spreader. It's a piece of chunky metal. I actually have some measurements of it, but there's not really much that, to be honest, we've already seen all of this. We already have pictures and descriptions and calculations on the die in some of our articles, and basically everything about this chip we've already seen. So, the interesting thing is the cutouts.
Yeah,
that's for folks who use too much TIM. You're going to wish you didn't. And for guys like me who change processors a lot, we're going to wish we didn't, because that's going to be messy and it's going to be hard to clean. And if you're using conductive thermal paste, you're probably not going to want to use it on this unless you know what you're doing. Because otherwise you're going to have to, take nail polish and go over those, like clear nail polish, and go over those capacitors or something similar, some type of sealant. Because if you get conductive TIM on those capacitors, you're gonna
goodbye processor.
Goodbye, yes.
And why is it that they put those surface mounted devices, those capacitors, on this side? Is the back side just all covered with the LGA land grid array pin?
Correct. So there's the concept of pin density, which is how many pins. So we know that they use 1,718 pins inside of the socket. In comparison, Intel uses 1,700 pins for Alder Lake. But there's a difference in how they do it. And the difference is they have pins across the whole back and nothing else. Intel puts their capacitors that are on the top, they put them on the back like this. So when you look at pins per square inch, even though Intel has only 18 fewer pins, they are in a much smaller area. And you see on the back of here, you can see these squares. They look like squares if the camera is picking it up. Those are groups. The pin density, the pins per square inch, are so high on Alder Lake that they're actually, the size of these pads are actually different sizes in different locations. A lot of people wonder why that is and why you see that. It's because not all of those pads are the same. It's kind of a new thing they're doing to ensure contact. AMD's approach is just pure pins, and it gives them a lot more space, and so they don't have to resort to those types of techniques. So what is, for the end user, what does it mean? Nothing. You get a really cool looking CPU though, right?
That you then cover with a heatsink.
Yeah, that you never see again. But hey, I love it. I think
it's cool.
Aggressive. I like it. It's great.
Sorry. All right, let's see. So we've already looked over the core specs. Anything you to call out?
DDR5 5200. The deal with DDR5 5200 is that is the minimum supported speed for Ryzen 7000. Raptor Lake supports 5600. And what does that mean? The impact of memory varies by chip, so we'll have to get them in the labs to tell you how much of a difference that actually means. But if you put in 4, that's only with 2 sticks though. If you put in 4 sticks, that drops to DDR5 3600, which is actually lower than JEDEC spec for DDR5.
Are you saying that drops on Intel or on AMD or both?
Both. So as we get into the quad stick era of with DDR5 is becoming super problematic. As they continue to increase the speeds on these over the coming years, DDR5 is going to get up to 7,000 and 8,000, and maybe even beyond.
10,000.
That would be something, wouldn't it? But this is going to happen, just like with DDR4. You know, it started out, it was so slow, it was potato, and now you know you can go pretty fast, even at standard settings. But I was speaking with a gentleman who's a chair on the JEDEC committee, and he said just recently, and he said that with DDR5, it's getting to the point where it's untenable, and that we may not even see 2 DIMMs per channel with future generations of memory like DDR6. It's becoming such a problem. That's the segue. Okay.
All right. This is generational comparison. Ryzen 7000 versus 5000.
Correct.
You can see like mostly the interesting thing is, you know, besides core counts stayed the same, cache sizes, they're pretty similar. L2 cache is larger, right, with Zen 4.
Yeah.
Obviously, you changed memory type. Power went up.
Power went up considerably, and this is because they were power constrained with the previous gen socket. They didn't have enough power. There are cases where with some of the high core count chips, as you load cores, like on a 5950X, which has 16 cores, when you get to about 12 cores, you start pulling this maximum amount of power, and then it won't go over. You can load 13, and then the 14th, and the 15th, and the 16th, the power flatlines. That's because they don't have enough power to feed that chip. If they could feed it more power, it could use it.
They could clock higher and run faster and all those good things.
Yeah, because clocks drop as you load more cores. So the mid-range boosts on Ryzen 7000 are going to be absolutely tremendous. They have much more power. And it's a 5-nanometer process, which is consuming less power. So it doesn't require as much, but now you can, you know, you can push it even higher. It's, I guess, you know, it's going to be great.
Generational pricing, like if you compare the current prices, it would be higher. But if you look at the launch prices for the 5000 series, you know, it's equal or lower across the board, right?
Except for the 7700.
That's right. Yep. That's $100 more. But yeah, that's an interesting one because the 5700 came out a bit after the original launch, right?
Correct. Yes.
And then they dropped the price.
Pricing. Yeah, and I mean, let's be honest. The 5700X is just the 5800X. They just changed the name and cut the price a little bit. They tend to do these sorts of things. So, yeah.
All right, now this next slide, I think this is kind of where it gets a little exciting. The AMD versus Intel comparison. We've got both Raptor Lake and Alder Lake in here. Obviously, we don't know official pricing for Raptor Lake yet, but we'll find that out in the coming months.
And these stats are about as close as you're going to get. I mean, these specs are good. If there's going to be changes, they're going to be extremely minute. One thing that you notice here is that for the Raptor Lake, for the first time in eons since Zen launched, Intel will take the core count lead for the first time. That comes courtesy of eCores. So here's what AMD isn't increasing cores, but they are giving us more frequency. They're like Intel of old. Intel is now like AMD. They're adding cores across the stack and increasing frequency. So this is going to get interesting. You look at the 13900K has 24 cores. I mean, yes, 16 of those are E-cores, but only question the E-cores if you don't. I mean, if you're using multi-threaded work, they are powerful. If you're doing the type of work that requires those kind of cores, it makes it. It's perfect. They are powerful. So that's going to be a pretty impressive chip, especially running at 5.8 gigahertz. On the two fastest.
What will the E-cores clock at? Like they clocked quite a bit lower on Alder Lake. Has that changed at all? with Raptor Lake?
They are basically the same. I think you get 100 to 200 megahertz more per. But the clock speeds aren't really as important there.
Right.
The big thing is just parallelism, right?
And efficiency.
Yeah. So when you look down at the one thing here is when you look at the 12400, I put that on this chart down there by the 7600X, even though it's $100 less than the 7600X, and that's because the 12400 in this is already better than the 5600X, which is the previous Gen 6 core from AMD. But you look at that 13400, it has E-cores now. They've added it to it. Like the 12400 is the gaming chip. It is the mainstream gamer's chip. It is cheap and it is fast and it is great. Adding 4 E-cores to that, it doesn't have E-cores now. Intel is adding them with this next generation. It's going to be pretty impressive.
Yeah, we've actually got an error on that 12400 slide in the parentheses. It should be 6 plus 0, but still.
Oh, my bad.
I made the slides out of your data. Shame on you. All right. Anything else? Let's see to cover here.
No.
All right. This is interesting. So this is Ryzen over time, each generation, and looking at clock speed boosts. And, they've gotten faster, but look at that jump on this upcoming. Like, that's huge. 16% boost in clock speed. Couple that with a 13% boost in IPC is what AMD is saying. Like, that's going to be significant gains in. And
the die is smaller. It's like 16% small off the top of my head. It's in the article, but it's so you get a smaller, much faster process. I'll be honest with you. I am shocked that 5 nanometer is clocking that high. I mean, I couldn't be more impressed. It wasn't too long ago that they were really concerned about. Frequencies dropping with newer process nodes. And even when I actually interviewed Mark Papermaster, AMD's CTO, and even he had said, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, I wrote an article about my interview with him. And even he had said, we should expect frequencies to begin flatlining over the next few generations. Well, it's the next few generations. Look at that. It looks like five, maybe he's talking about 3 nanometer. Those folks live in the future, but 5 nanometer is I'm impressed. Color me shocked. I mean, I think that's fantastic. From everything that I've heard from just various places, 5 nanometer is truly something. It really is. So,
yeah. So I mean, like potentially up to 30% faster than a 5950X is roughly what we're looking at. We'll see how that plays out in the real world. On September 27th is the launch date, right?
Yeah. And it's going to be really, really good. But, AMD, of course, shared a lot of their benchmarks, and I think some of those probably are a little bit exaggerated. But it is going to be
we'll get to those in a moment, yeah.
But it is going to be very good. Well, how it stacks up against Raptor Lake, now that we don't know. It's going to be a lot closer than I thought. Because remember, Intel is beating AMD right now. Alder Lake is ahead of Ryzen 5000 in everything but power consumption. So it's most critically in price.
Do we have a launch date for Raptor Lake that you can share, or is that still unknown?
Yeah, you can look at our Raptor Lake, all we know, but that's not official. I'm hearing that everybody expects the announcement for Raptor Lake at Intel Innovation at the end of next month.
So it's going to be very closely timed between Zen 4 and Raptor Lake.
Yes, this AMD is.
Paul might be a little bit busy at the end of the month.
I might
just
be
just
a little bit. AMD is these chips become available at retail the day before Intel's event. Coincidence? Maybe not.
Very, very coincidental. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's going to be very interesting comparison. I mean, it's going to be a big change for AMD users as well. We'll get to that in a minute because they'll be switching sockets and memory and basically everything. So
taking out loans,
Yeah, not a cheap upgrade this time. No drop in. All right, let's see. IPC uplift. This is AMD's benchmarks.
Correct. I'm not a fan of using multi-threaded workloads to measure IPC. They did that a few here. I guess it depends upon how you measure it, and they have access to tools and methodologies that, of course, I do not. They're also using, so, maybe it's probably a little bit more accurate, but generally for us folks on the street, it's not the best method to do that. And then they're also using games to measure IPC, which is a little
it's
bit
not
different.
IPC that they're showing here. It's more like just overall performance at the same clock speed, taking the whole platform into account, right?
Yeah. So yes, there's a lot of questions about how these results were generated. They were also generated with overclocked memory. So AMD has Expo, or
so they locked the frequency of the CPU at 4 gigahertz, but overclocked the memory.
They overclocked the memory. It's in the test notes. We have the test notes in the announcement article. In the test notes, which a lot of, I'll be honest with you, probably 95% of media don't read or even understand, is in the test notes. I don't even know if they know it's there, because AMD is overclocking the memory. Now, AMD, if you overclock your memory, it's going to void your warranty. They're using their Expo profiles, which is the equivalent of XMP with, and they also support XMP, but regardless, it is overclocked. So that might give them a few percentages of gain, right? I mean,
do you
not
think
to say that there aren't plenty of improvements there, but there are a few things here to where some folks who are more on the technical side might say, throw the flag.
So they're running at DDR5 6000 instead of the officially supported DDR5 5200, right?
Correct. Yes.
How much do you think that helps? I mean, like
that I can't tell you. That's the problem. I don't have the chips, and if I did, I couldn't tell you I did. So we have to test to see. I mean,
it's like a 15%. What is that? 5-10% uplift in memory bandwidth.
At the end of the day, when it comes to results like this, you have to realize that, as you can see across here, there is a whole spate of, some get more, some get less. Look at CPU-Z plus 1%. Okay, look at the W prime is plus 39%. That's because that's hidden right in the L3 cache. But or L2, as a matter of fact, which is double. But the point is, I mean, you can look at most of these and understand why they're getting the results that they're getting. But you can switch the benchmarks that you're presenting, and you can skew this either way.
Yeah.
We have to trust them to some extent, because IPC impacts all workloads differently. So the mix of things that they choose to show, I mean, we have to trust them in some aspects. I mean, I think that some of the ways that they went about this, I don't think are the best. But at the same time, that's why folks like us measure it. They're keeping us in work. And also, you have different types of, you have integer, you have floating point. There are different types of instructions to get different levels of improvement, for instance, AVX. So,
and they're not necessarily running at the same power either. Like, they're locked at 4 gigahertz, but the Zen 4 could be using more power for all we know.
Correct. Yes, this also isn't a measurement of efficiency. And here's the thing, right? I mean, this is it's for science. What really matters is when you turn it on, how fast are your games running? Because you're going to be getting higher clocks than you were. Here we're comparing them clock to clock. So IPC is an important thing, but it's not the most important thing in the world. The end of performance is, sure.
Oh. So. All right, let's see. This is their breakdown of their IPC contributions. So they're saying 13%, and you can see they're showing like front-end improvements are a big chunk of that.
Front-end and load store is 60% of the improvement. Then they improve branch prediction and some other things that you will learn a lot more about soon.
Yeah, and then they say execution engine, L2 cache. I mean, the L2 cache often won't contribute much, but as you pointed out, like W prime at the far right at 39%, that's probably a huge beneficiary of L2 cache.
A good thing about any type of cache increase is that, number one, when you increase capacity, you always pay a penalty in clocks. That's just a little bit physical limitation, because once the cache is bigger, you have to travel far further to the ends of it. There's just no way. There's no way around that. But it's better than traveling all the way across that link to the I/O die, because it's on a whole other die, and getting stuff from main memory. So you clear up the fabric a lot, and it has a lot of other advantages. So less traffic on your fabric. It helps. It floats all boats.
Other thing that's going to be interesting with Zen 4 versus Raptor Lake or Alder Lake, we've now got AVX 512 from AMD, and we don't get it from Intel.
But AVX 512, so this is a little bit complicated, confusing, but not. They're not running actual AVX 512. They're running double pumped AVX 256, which means they actually didn't really increase the size of the, or add FPUs on the chip. They're just enabled it to run an AVX 512 instruction across 2 clocks. Bam, bam. So
their actual throughput won't be that much.
They will get a gain, but it won't be double for sure. So when you look here, when it says FP32 inferencing with the AVX 512, you see how they got a 30% jump, right? But you would imagine against Ryzen 5000, if you went from AVX 256 to AVX 512, you would expect a neat double. You would expect the doubling. Now, the reason why you would do this is because AVX 512 is extremely heavy on power. When AVX 512 runs, it causes what are called local brownouts on the silicon. Like it doesn't have enough power, so the chip kind of spazzes. And these are called localized brownouts.
It just sounds so bad, right? Like
brownouts
are not good.
Yeah, on your chip, like the area where it's running browns out. It can't get the power to it fast enough. That's why Intel has to downclock. So by doing this, the typical reason why you would double pump any type of an instruction that's power heavy, it sucks a lot of power, is so that doesn't happen, so you can still run at full clocks. Because remember, if you're dropping the clocks, everything else is dropping too. You're not running just across the chip, just AVX on every single core all the time. There's still other things going on. So when you drop the frequency to speed that up, you actually slow some other things down.
So there's not split domain for the clocks. Like you don't have like your regular execution units running off one clock domain and then a lower one for AVX 512.
That would depend upon how you cut it up.
Like right? What does Intel do, I guess would be my question.
Intel at first, for a long time, it was the whole chip. And this was a massive problem, especially with Xeons. Like the customers hated AVX because it would slow everything down. If you had one core running an AVX workload, all cores would go down. Over time, they made it to where it would adjust. And it would go by core or by groups of cores. And then over time, they made it now to where there are different levels of AVX that drop to different clock levels. I think there are 4 subdomains for Ice Lake that they added, or 4 different, power levels for Ice Lake. It gets very complicated. It took Intel probably, 5 or 6 generations longer than that to work out some of these complexities, and they're still dropping that. So there are reasons to do it, reasons not to do it.
I don't know what's going on with my audio, but it's totally.
I can hear you. Yes.
It's on my end. My audio is totally distorting in my headset, like horribly. But we'll roll with that. And I screwed up my camera as well.
RIP Audio says. Man,
I should. I don't know why I've got that. I am not Judy. Judy is a video person for future. All right, let's see. We'll go on here. Tell me about the 5 nanometer while I correct my audio, hopefully.
Okay, 5 nanometer. Here we go. Core 2, Core plus L2 area. They have, the increases aren't that much considering they moved from the 5 nanometer node. Here we're looking at a comparison on the bottom left of the Zen 4 core versus Alder Lake. So with Alder Lake's Golden Code, 5 nanometer TSMC versus 7 nanometer Intel. AMD's core and L2 combined are about half the size of Intel's core. It's way smaller. And in the world of semiconductors, smaller means cheaper. This is a wonderful thing. This is huge. Then you look at the SoC performance per watt. Intel or AMD is claiming 47% advantage. They have 1.47x the performance of a Golden Code core. And It's smaller, it sucks less power, and it's faster. You can't beat that. 50% less area, 47% more energy efficient. You're using technically it's called the M5 TSMC process, which AMD worked with in a process called DTCO, which is Design Technology Co-Optimization. And they create nodes that are very highly specialized. So AMD's version of 5 nanometer, they nearly call a custom node, but it's M5. AMD is choosing to market it as a custom node, but when you hear about Intel or NVIDIA with their next-gen GPUs, say they have their own custom node in 4N rather, it's pretty much the same type of technique. They enhanced the metal stack. They added, some stuff. There's Jared. It doesn't look like you anymore.
I can hear you, but it's my whole system. I just tried. I thought it was maybe like the USB headset that I'm wearing that went crazy. But
yeah.
They're saying it's your voice is gone. Oh, that would explain it.
It's mine.
Yeah, so it's your mic or whatever that's screwing up. I thought it was just my headset had screwed up, and so I'm like, oh man, what happened to Paul's voice? All right, Paul's gonna hop out, come back on. I sound okay, right, everyone? Someone give me a thumbs up. Anyway, I think we've covered this slide okay. I was reading some interesting stuff. Like one of the things to be aware of is, Intel's got their Intel 7 process. AMD's using TSMC's 5 nanometer process. How do those compare, like in terms of density and all this other stuff? TSMC has done some clever marketing. So like it's difficult to say for certain how everything compares, but some of TSMC's advertised densities are not actually in line with what real world chips are using. Like we've had Apple's 5 nanometer chips for a while now, and they are not hitting the density metrics that AMD has. Say something, Paul.
Hello.
Oh, that sounds much better. Excellent.
What happened? I need a new camera.
You need a new computer.
Yes.
Oh wait, you'll have Zen Four soon. Excellent.
Correct.
Are you still using that crazy Intel Xeon W whatever?
No, I switched to the Threadripper Pro.
Excellent.
3975 WX, 32 cores. It's completely reasonable.
And what mic are you using?
Logitech C320 or something.
Wait, you're using your camera mic, really?
Yeah.
Oh, because I saw you. It looks like you got Apple earbuds on, so it's like.
I don't. Yeah. It's
okay.
Not Apple.
All right. Was there anything else we wanted to talk about with 5 nanometer TSMC? I was saying, from what I've read, TSMC's 5 nanometer is not necessarily that different from Intel 7. I mean, they are different, right? But in terms of
density wise, a lot of the difference between them in the size is just going to be design decisions, right? And especially with memory, but you have to be careful when you measure density on process nodes, because a lot of it comes down to the memory. The memory isn't shrinking as fast as the logic, and there's big differences in those two between the two vendors. So I think the TSMC, it looks to me like, and I am going to try to find this out, it looks like with 5 nanometer, their L2, their memory, standard cells for memory have increased dramatically. We'll see.
In size.
Yes, correct. And some of it is just design decisions. AMD is not using an actual true AVX 512. You could almost call it an emulated AVX 512 and get it and be pretty accurate. I mean, you can run it and it's a little bit faster, but it's not as fast. Intel, on the other hand, is running full AVX 512. So there are design decisions and things that they've incorporated into their cores. Also, there are just different things in there. So, I mean, you can go on for a long time about that, but they have built their cores different.
So here's a question from, I won't even try and pronounce that, Shreyas. Is 7800X a name reserved for 3D V-Cache version? We've seen some rumored leaks of 3D V-Cache names. I don't think I saw, like, X3D is usually what they're going to say. So yes, they could have a a 7700 X3D or 7800 X3D. We don't know for sure if those are going to come out in January, I think was one of the rumors we saw. But there's definitely potential for 3D V-Cache variants to launch after the initial wave.
AMD has said officially that at least one 3D V-Cache model will arrive before the end of the year. They didn't say just one, but they did say 3D V-Cache will come this year, but they didn't say how many. So we don't know. Before they only launched one. So officially, at least one, possibly more. I would expect more, but I don't know because that will upset their whole product stack. I bet your money the number of 3D V-Cache models that they release will be dependent entirely upon how competitive Intel is.
So this is AMD used SAM in their test, which gives their CPU an advantage. I'm not sure how true that is because that SAM mostly affects your gaming performance. And if they didn't use resizable bar on Intel, then maybe. But the second part is what I wanted to focus on. 3D V-Cache is going to destroy Intel in gaming unless Intel has one too. As far as we know, Intel does not have any stacked cache. And we saw what was the gains on the 5800 X3D from V-Cache? Do you remember
for what?
In gaming performance?
Oh, the thing about it is you can't put a single number on it because it's so variable.
Well, it's like IPC that AMD talked about earlier.
Yeah, but even worse than that. I mean, even worse than that.
Because clock speeds drop a lot. So, 3D V-Cache on like a 7950X, like that's currently boosting up to 5.7 gigahertz. With 3D V-Cache on top of that chip, like we might see clocks drop well below 5 gigahertz again for their maximum boost clock. I mean, we don't know, but we do know that it's like an extra layer of insulation sitting on top of your chip. So it matters.
But it is also the second generation of it. So I would expect some pretty big advances, especially in thermal dissipation. We'll see. I would be very bullish on what it's going to look like. It's going to be Intel's got a tough hill to climb to beat 3D V-Cache. I don't think they can do it. But that's just my opinion. Until Meteor Lake.
So that's not the one I wanted to click on. Meteor Lake. Speaking of, if Intel Meteor Lake can swap CPUs between Intel and TSMC technology, what stops Intel from in the future implementing both Intel process and TSMC process transistors? I mean, theoretically nothing except cost, because I don't think you're going to be able to. Well, I know you can't take an Intel 4 design and just drop it into TSMC N3.
Absolutely not. So not even in the realm of possibility. I mean,
so you have to rework everything.
Yeah, these things are designed to work with the process node. I mean, every single everything. Yes.
Certain things, like Intel is planning certain parts of Meteor Lake are going to be fabbed via TSMC, though, right?
Yeah, TSMC makes more of Meteor Lake than Intel. I have an article that breaks it down for you, but it is it's I think 3 of the 4 chiplets are TSMC. So here we go. Yes. You have the CPU tile, which is Intel 4. You have the Foveros base die, which is the big die where they're putting all these chiplets on top. So the base die is very simple. It's old technology. That's also Intel. It's 22 FFL. It's a process node. But the GPU is TSMC N5. The SoC and the I/O tile are TSMC N6. They will swap these tiles out and use them as they see fit as process node technology improves. So they can just take the CPU out, bam, and drop a new CPU on that has smaller things, because the I/O die and the SoC tile really don't matter for performance at all. They don't even have to change those in the future, probably for several generations. And the GPU tile is going to be, do you need to change it? They can. They'll move to 3 nanometer, I would assume, but they can change it different cadences now. So if one thing's behind, other things can go forward.
All right. I wanted to. I've opened your article so that I can hit this question. Wait. There. Resizable bar decreases performance when you put an Intel CPU with an AMD GPU. So I wanted to check on this because this is important. What GPU did they use for testing? And I pull up their test notes, and it is a Radeon RX 6950 XT running Windows 11. Smart access memory, PCIe resizable bar are on. So there's a bunch of stuff. My understanding was Rebar did not drop performance on Intel. It just didn't help it as much as SAM, like because of SAM being AMD plus AMD kind of thing. So
that's my general
yeah.
thing, but I would defer to you on that. I mean,
Yeah,
if you want to throw stones at the testing, there's a lot more.
We'll get some others that are great here. So yes, Slim Jim, AMD used an AMD GPU instead of an NVIDIA GPU. Did they do it to make their numbers look better? Probably. Was that their only consideration? Probably not, because they don't want to advertise for NVIDIA, really.
Yeah, but they've been using NVIDIA GPUs for years.
Yeah, they have. I mean, the 6950 XT, to be clear, it is faster.
Yes.
If you're not running ray tracing, and especially if you're running at certain settings.
You could make a good argument to use it, especially if you're testing at 1080p, which I believe they will.
Yeah, I think in my test,
totally good argument. Yeah,
1080p and 1440p in my test in my GPU hierarchy, without ray tracing, those are both faster on the 6950, and it's only at 4K that the 3090 and 3090 Ti take the lead. And actually, I think the 6950 beats the 3090. It only loses to the 3090 Ti. I mean, it's all going to be, in the next month or so. I'm really hoping to get, RTX 4080, 4090.
You're not till next year is my guess.
Next year,
very end of the year.
No, I'm not talking AMD side. I'm saying NVIDIA's Ada. I think that's launching within the next 2 months. I think RDNA 3 will come out in November or December, but I think Ada will come out sooner.
I have no proof of anything, so it's just my opinion. I think that they have so much stuff in this warehouse that they're going to wait. That's me.
I think they're getting rid of their high-end stuff pretty good. I think their mid-range, like 3070 and below, that's what they need to clear inventory on more. But anyway, we'll go back to CPUs. Another comment here from Southern Headhunter. Fabric clock speed is very important for gaming memory tuned and overclocked 12600K SPD. So, yeah, I mean, if you tune things properly, you can improve your performance on both AMD and Intel. That's easier said than done. Like, I think Paul can do it. I could probably do it with a bit of effort, but I think a lot of people don't run that way. So out-of-box performance with enabling XMP is still arguably the more representative way of testing, because tuning sometimes also goes into that realm of like potentially voiding warranties if you tweak certain settings. All right, let's move on here. The platform, it grows with you. It grows on you. It's here.
It's expensive.
It's expensive. Starting from $125 for motherboards.
Yeah, I like that. But I don't think that that's the motherboards that we're going to see. If I might be, maybe I'll be shocked, but we'll see. They did say that the B600, the B series, those are going to arrive in October. They will be a month later than the first wave, which is the X series, which give them credit. If it was Intel, you'd be waiting a heck of a lot longer for the non-Z series boards, right?
Yeah, like
when credit's due. We're waiting a month, but be happy that's it, because Intel makes you wait like 4 or 5.
Like Z590 came out, and when did the B?
When they felt like it, right?
But I mean,
4 or 5 months later. Yeah. They take their time. So yeah, I don't think you'll see that 125 until you see those Bs.
What's the difference? What's the difference between B650 and B650 Extreme?
B650 has PCIe 5.0 only to the GPU, but my bad, the M.2 slot. When you add PCIe 5.0 lanes to a motherboard, it increases the cost of the motherboard dramatically because the layers have to be thicker and they have to be made with more robust materials. In addition, they have to use redrivers and things like that to equalize voltage because you can't shoot that signal that far without these extra components. So it's very expensive. So if you're just doing PCIe 5.0 to an M.2 port, the SSD, that is only 4 lanes wide. The impact on price is minimal. You can do that. You could throw a by 4 lane on there quite easy, and the M.2 port is right by the CPU. Now, so that's B650. You get PCIe 4 everywhere except your M.2.
Your one M.2 slot, right?
One M.2, which makes actually a ton of sense because that's the only thing that benefits from it right now, and probably for the next few years, to be honest. Let's be honest.
Yeah, we'll see what happens when these next gen GPUs arrive, if they even support Gen 5.
Exactly. B650 takes it one step further and gives you your first GPU slot.
Wait, B650 Extreme?
Yes, excuse me.
Okay.
Yes. B650 Extreme gives you the M.2 slot and a by 16 GPU slot, PEG1. So your PCIe, your first slot, the one for your GPU. So,
and what does X670 do though? Isn't that the same thing as B650 Extreme?
AMD has a chipset. They have taken the chiplet approach to your chipset. So when you get a chipset, you get 1 chip for the Bs and 2 chips for the X. So you get more connectivity.
Oh, I thought it was so both X series have 2 chipsets.
I believe.
I thought it was only X670E that had the 2.
So many details.
Now I'm calling him out. We'll find out who's right in a little bit.
Well,
all right.
It's. I believe that is correct, but I mean I could be wrong.
Yeah. So main thing here, like AM5 is coming.
B only has 1 chip for sure.
Right. AM5 is coming. AMD plans to support it through at least 2025. So we'll get, what is that, 3, possibly 4 years out of it? 2025 plus. Yes. DDR5 is required. Will they ever do Zen 4 with a DDR4 chip in some fashion? Like, could they backport Zen 4 with an IO chiplet and DDR4 and make it work on an AM4? Would it be worth doing?
They could. Would it be worth doing? I don't know. Probably not, because they're going to have to tape out a new core. The inside of the core and the pathways inside of the processor are made for DDR5. They're made for PCIe 5.0. Everything, the fabrics and everything in there is designed to accommodate the throughput and things like of these faster memory interfaces. They've tuned
and higher latencies, right?
Correct. They've tuned the design to that. Could they do it? I think they probably have to tape out a new core. But
so they probably won't then.
I would assume they would not. I would expect AM4 to. They say it will live on. I expect that AM4 to probably be the budget for a while. I mean, if you can get 5900X and 5700X down there in some price, down at some low prices, that's a heck of a budget platform.
I mean 5900X is that's not a cheap chip to make though. I would think it'd be more like the 5800X,
5700. Or something.
Where it's single CPU chiplets.
Yeah, but the point is it's going to be much cheaper than Zen 4 for the foreseeable future, and Zen 3 is plenty powerful. I mean, if you're just, you know what I'm saying. Maybe you don't.
Let's see. We got, what else do we have here? Generational performance. This is again 7950, looking at the 5950X.
Okay, PCIe X670 is the same. You get X670 Extreme gives you chips that support PCIe 5.0 for 2 graphics card slots and 1. Okay. Yeah, it's kind of the same.
X670 can add 2 by 8 Gen 5 slots.
Correct, yes.
Whereas B650 Extreme is a single X16 slot.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I don't know anyone hardly that even looks at dual graphics cards anymore. I certainly don't want to. I mean, I guess I would if they offered them, but then I'd need to get 2 identical GPUs, and that opens up a whole nother can of worms. And GPUs have largely stopped worrying about SLI and Crossfire anyway. All right, 5950X for 50X. You can see performance comparisons again. I don't think there's anything really major to cover here. I mean, V-Ray render, that's one of these generational creator performance. Those are your heavily threaded workloads that were running smack dab into the power limits of AM4.
Yep. Now they're free.
So they got more power, more IPC, more clocks, more. Someone, I disagree with you, Arkeld. I do not want. I mean, I get the purpose, but it never worked well, and it added micro stutter, and it just had so many problems with actual games, and it cost so much, and it generated so much heat, and I did not like. And 3-way, 4-way SLI was just a joke. It was like for benchmarks, and that was it. All right, rendering performance again. We've talked a bit about that. Efficiency, 47% efficiency improvement. They're saying. Performance per watt. Let's see. Which we've covered this pretty much as well. Where's the benchmark? Oh, here we go.
Okay, here we go. Yeah,
good benchmarks. Yes.
So look at the Geekbench. When my trained eyes know that 2040 is really not half of 2175, folks. Look at the size of the bar for 2040 and the size of 2175 and 2272.
I can help you with that.
Yeah, that would make sense if that 2275 was 4475. But this is a non-zero axis, and
that's terrible.
I handed Jared this. This is zero axis. Yes, it's faster in Geekbench. Yes, the Ryzen 7000 is faster than the Core i9 in Geekbench. But when you see charts, and it's while he's describing the previous set of charts, I know those are non-zero axes. Sure, they have the percentage there, but it's misleading, and it's done intentionally. If you think this isn't done intentionally, it's done intentionally, folks. They're professionals. So the second I see that, I see it a mile away.
And the gaming thing is also questionable because, like, they say, hey, 7600X beats the 12900K by 5% on average. I don't know how many games they tested.
And to be fair, Intel plays these same games.
Yes.
So,
but we've got 5 games listed here.
And nobody gets a pass.
So it's 20, 32, 34 divided by 5. So they must have done more than the 5 games they're showing here. But I'm like, well, Middle-earth Shadow of War, that's old. Grand Theft Auto 5, that's ancient.
So here's part of the problem. And here's one thing that I just want to touch on real fast with these gaming results. AMD has created their own type of XMP. It is called Expo. And the reason why is because they want to tune the timings for their memory. And with XMP, Intel does not allow them. That XMP is Intel spec. Now, you can use XMP on AMD things, but AMD can't change the timings on XMP. So they're not designed to work perfectly with their chips. It's such a problem, and they lose so much performance in that manner, that they created Expo to allow full control of their overclocking and the timings to be all set exactly perfectly to match their chip. Now, that's great. That's wonderful. But when they tested the gaming results, they loaded their Expo profiles on the 12900K.
Oh.
It says right in the test result, 12900K with Expo profiles loaded in caps. And
so now it's the reverse of AMD using XMP. It's forcing Intel to use
their timings that they know for a fact aren't good for Intel. So, I mean, I think it's kind of they're mad at Intel about the XMP thing. This has been an ongoing dispute between the companies because AMD doesn't even know the inner workings of the XMP spec because AMD doesn't have access. They can't even tell you. I've had a lot of talks with people about the Expo. You'll hear a lot more about this over the coming month. But yeah, it's interesting. But I also think that it would have been easy for them to use XMP on the 12900K against their chip with Expo. And let's see this.
And they also say here, they say Expo enhanced their performance by up to 11%. So, that's if it's 5% faster, either subtract 11% for
But that's 11% over stock speed, not over XMP speed.
Yeah.
So it doesn't tell you a lot.
Yeah.
I want to do an experiment. I'm sure you will see the results of that experiment when I can show it to you. So.
All right. So my title for this slide, I called it questionable benchmarks. We already covered that. Expo, anything else you want to talk about with the Expo and DDR5 stuff?
No. DDR5 is awesome, but you could forget quad sticks.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Well, PCIe 5 ecosystem drives for PCIe 5 are supposed to be
starting in
November
2022. Unfortunately, what happened is the SSD people ran into some significant challenges, and they will not have the SSDs ready for launch of Ryzen 7000. They were supposed to. They've been saying they'd be ready for a year, but they pushed it back. Additionally, the first PCIe 5.0 SSDs, in order to completely saturate the bus and go as fast as they can, which I think is what?
16 gigabytes
per
second.
16 gigabytes. They need a certain type of NAND that communicates at a certain speed, the chips. They got to run at 2,400 megatransfers a second. Unfortunately, there's only 1,600 available for now and for the foreseeable, for this year. So instead of launching with 16 gigabytes, the peak speeds will be 10. It's still faster than PCIe 4.0, but it's not as fast as we had anticipated.
Yeah, I mean, like Intel's been dealing with this on their other platform since last year, right? Yeah. So this is interesting too. This is important. DDR4 and DDR5 pricing. Paul pulled up these real world prices.
Z did.
Z
asked Z to do this for me. Our memory guy, he's the smart one about memory, not me. So I figured let's just go right to the guy who knows. And I said, hey, give me some comparable stuff. So the stock DDR4 and the stock DDR5 is just, okay, what's your garden variety pricing? Unfortunately, we're looking at twice the price for a 16 gigabyte kit. He did find two kits that have comparable CL timings. This is why I had him do this, because it's just faster to use his knowledge. And then one of the kits was only 16% more expensive, but that was an extreme outlier. So you're not going to find that much. When you look at max F clock, what this means is Zen processors they're best to do optimum speeds at certain F clock speeds. So there's like a practical limit to where if you go beyond that, it really doesn't make sense to spend money, right? To spend more money to go beyond that. It's just the payoff is either nothing or such a point of diminishing returns. So max F clock is where we're pegging this to be the maximum reasonable high-speed kit, like an XMP or Expo. And here we could see 114% on one, and then another is negative 36%. And again, that's an outlier. We're showing both best case and worst case.
Yeah, when you get those super high speeds and low latencies, they're enthusiast kits that often cost way more than anyone should reasonably pay. Like
AMD, yeah, I agree. AMD is saying 5,600 is the sweet spot, and if that's the case, that's a pretty good sweet spot. But it's still going to be expensive. It's going to be more expensive. Right now, there's no demand for DDR5. It's fallen through the floor. When Ryzen 7000 happens, I'm sure that will change. We'll see what happens. But I don't know. We'll see. It's hard to predict pricing in this environment.
Yeah, that is true. That takes care of the Zen 4 stuff. Few other things they did, like AMD taking a page out of Steve Jobs' book. Lisa Su always likes to do that. And one more thing. So they did show RDNA 3 up and running with Zen 4, I believe. And they showed it running Lies of P, which I had never heard of.
I never heard of it. I put Liza P, right? In the live blog. What did I put? Liza
you put Liza P, and I that's what I heard too. So I'm like Googling. I'm like, what the heck is Liza P? Lies of P. It's an upcoming game. The fact that they show an upcoming game that no one can test with running, it tells us nothing about performance, but it does tell us. It tells us that they've got hardware in hand, that they've got their early cards working in the labs. To me, that's usually in the past has been an indication that the hardware will go to consumers in probably 3 months. So basically we're talking about a December launch for the Radeon RX 7000 series, the RDNA 3 cards. I still think NVIDIA is going to ship first, but NVIDIA might only ship very high-end cards like a 4090, probably a Titan card with 48 gigabytes of memory. We'll see. 4080, probably, but I'm skeptical that they'll go below the 4080 like soon. We might see it before the end of this year. We might see a 4070. I could easily see NVIDIA, depending on inventories and stuff, not shipping RTX 4070 and below until next year.
They had better hurry, Jared. You don't have enough GPUs on that shelf behind you.
Well,
but so organized. I hate you. Like I have stacks of chips. You've got this nice shelf, and I've got this.
So we moved into this house last year, and before we bought the place, like they have this room in the basement. It's an unfinished basement, except for one room that was like a daughter's bedroom or whatever, but this is that room. And I saw the pictures and I'm like, oh my gosh, that will be perfect for my office because it's got a laminate
floor. Move your head a little bit. Let me see. Now that looks nice. That's a cabinet, folks.
Now let's see. So this is the RX 6000. This is the RTX 30. These, I think it starts getting a little mixed up. Some of those are after our third-party cards. This is mostly RTX 20. This is GTX 10 and GTX 9.
I was right.
Then you've got like up here there's Vega Radeon 7 is this one, and like some of the RX 5000 series and RX 500 series and stuff are scattered around here. So like this is the main stuff that I test, and then this is like the older stuff. GTX 16 and RTX 20 series. And I was talking with Paul when AMD announced the Ryzen 7000 and they're making these big claims. I mean, we have to see the real world performance still.
It's going to be impressive. But
yeah. Well, and I said to Paul, I'm like, oh crap, like, am I going to have to look at upgrading my GPU test bed again to Ryzen 7000? And the thing is, of course, we also need to know, how does that stack up against Raptor Lake? I just upgraded to Alder Lake at the start of this year and retested every one of those dang graphics cards for over a period of weeks because it takes about a full solid day of testing just to get through one card. So I'm hoping to stick with Alder Lake until maybe Meteor Lake and whatever comes out next year from AMD. Anyway, I wanted to show this. Yeah. This is awesome as far as I'm concerned. Not that I don't like the Chinese, but like there were so many Chinese miners snapping up all of the RTX 30 series in 2020 and 2021. And the problem is cryptocurrency mining is dying fast. We'll see what happens when Ethereum goes proof of stake here. I'm excited to see that, honestly.
So just a thing here. This is a big development. But one thing you have to understand is anybody anywhere on the planet, literally that has an internet connection, can dial into AWS and rent 5,000 of any GPU that they want, literally at the click of a button. And you can get 50,000. Nothing prevents companies in China from doing that. So but their military isn't going to do that. They're not going to go model their next gen nuclear warheads or
on AWS.
On AWS, or their next gen stealth fighter on Microsoft Azure.
That's like a catch-22 thing. Have you ever read?
What we're doing is we're forcing them to do it. So yes, it can improve supply, but not nearly as much as you think. Basically, they're moving where the GPUs will be.
Yeah,
is what they're doing. They're saying, look, your top secret stuff can't use it because they wouldn't dare do it. The stuff for the military on AWS.
Did you ever read Catch-22?
No.
I read it back in high school, and like just the idea of like Amazon, AWS renting cloud services to China to design weapons to go to war against the U.S. Like, that is totally a catch-22 thing right there.
Well, yeah, it's just like selling steel to the Japanese before
Yeah,
World War II.
it was a funny.
You arm your enemies, so that's how it works. Anyway.
All right, I think that's about it. Any other questions, comments? We've pretty much hit everything. Ryzen 7000 coming in less than a month. At the end of this month, September 27th. Save your pennies because it's going to be an expensive upgrade for a lot of people if they want to upgrade. If you're already running Ryzen 5000, though, you need to be someone like Paul or me if you're going to upgrade, I guess. Anyway, that's all for this week. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time.